Just left. It's now 7 o'clock, so the start line was 3 hours ago, and it was an absolutely amazing feeling to see so many people out there.
South African Kirsten Neuschäfer beat 15 rivals in the Golden Globe Round the World race that is regarded as the world's most challenging competition the sailing world has to offer. And not only did she win, she also crossed the finishing line a day early, and she went to save another sailor whose boat was sinking. And we have in the studio, we have Kirsten, and it's such an honor to speak to you. Well, welcome to Biz News.
Thank you so much, Linda. I'm very honored to be here.
Well, we're going to talk about your journey across the sea and, what you ate and the onions that fed you. But I think for South Africans, we want to know who you are. You are what we call an outlier. You do all these things, and you're alone on an ocean, and you're a woman who's doing all this. And we want to know also your journey. So where did this all start? Where did you start sailing? Where did you go to school?
Well, I actually didn't even grow up on the coast. I grew up in Pretoria, and I went to school in Pretoria. And the first sailing I ever did was as a child on the Hartbeespoort Dam, sailing optimists and Hobie cats and that kind of thing. And then we used to go down to the coast every Christmas, and then we usually go to Sedgefield, and then we do more sailing on the Swartflat. But one thing I knew as a child already is that I loved the water. I loved swimming. I loved being in the water. I loved any sort of sport that had to do with the water. And I discovered as a child very early as well that I loved traveling. I loved the outdoors, camping, hiking, cycling, no matter what it was. But it already was in my head as a child that sailing's kind of the perfect thing because it's a water sport. It's and if you can sail a boat, the sea, it kind of becomes like the road to everywhere. So it would be a wonderful way to explore the world as well.
We talk about sailing, but that's not the only thing you do. You've also cycled from south to north, or the other way around, I'm not sure, north to south, across Africa. I mean, so it's not only that you sail, you tackle these things that many other people wouldn't.
Yes, that's true. I did cycle from north to south through, the length of Africa, from Morocco actually down to Cape Town when I was 22. And that was part of this great love for the outdoors and adventure. It's been, part of my life ever since childhood. And every time I've tackled a thing like that, I've obviously encountered obstacles, and there have been some really difficult moments where you ask yourself, why am I doing this? Why don't I just live a normal life like someone else? And, I could cut out a lot of stress out of my life. But then I don't really know if that's true, because if I was living a normal life, there'd probably be a whole lot of other stress factors for one. And every time you do actually achieve your goal, it kind of becomes an addictive thing. It's like, that was amazing. I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I tackled the challenges. I've learned loads from having undertaken the challenge, and you just want to keep going and do more.
So what is it in you that, because most of these are solo, you're alone, totally. What is it about you that don't mind being alone, don't mind doing these challenges without somebody saying, come on guys, let's rally?
Linda, I think it's probably a part of my nature to some degree. I think I've always been like that. I was quite a loner as a child. I used to keep to myself and do my own thing. I loved animals. I actually wanted to become a wildlife vet at some other stage of my childhood, because I'd actually, when I was a kid, I felt more comfortable with animal company sometimes than I did with, other human company. So I was quite introverted as a child, and I quite enjoyed just doing my solitary thing. And it's still like that to this day, except I'm not quite as introverted as I was when I was a child. I really do enjoy socializing. I love people, but I still like tackling solo adventures, because I get a great satisfaction out of knowing that I can be completely and totally self-sufficient then it also forces you to be self-sufficient when when you go off sailing on your own. If something goes wrong, whether it's electrical or mechanical or whatever, you can't phone the electrician or a friend or someone to come and help you. You really have to figure out how to solve the problem on your own. So it kind of challenges you to learn more and to discover your own potential. And I guess that's why I enjoy solo adventures. But even in saying that, all the adventures I have done, like the cycle trip or even this race, I was alone out there sailing, but I had many, many people helping me to get to the start line. So as much as one can claim it's a solo adventure, it isn't really entirely a solo adventure.
You talk about people who got you to the start line. Do you have mentors? Do you have people that you think, oh, I want to do what they did? Because I've looked at South Africans. There's Bertie Reed and John Martin. They've also circumnavigated the globe. But you're the first one to do it non-stop and basically unassisted once you were out on the water.
Yes, well, people like Bertie Reed and John Martin and JJ Provoyer, they've all been, people that I've admired ever since I discovered their existence, and ever since I, at the age of, say, after my bicycle trip, I started becoming really interested in sailing. Ever since I started reading about these people, and also in the context of this race, there's Sir Robert Knox Johnston and there's Bernard Moitessier. I read all those books, and it was definitely something that I really wanted to do. So yes, I wouldn't necessarily call them role models, because I'm not necessarily someone who's followed role models per se in my life, but I certainly have stolen all those people's good ideas and admired their tenacity. So definitely they've been huge inspirations to me.
Well, when I looked at some of the videos of the sailing world, I mean, there were cameras that went into the yacht that you used, and they were really intrigued by everything from the tray, which looked as though it came out of a care home. Just the tray you had, every little cubby hole. They were so intrigued by how you were doing this. How long did the planning take to do this Golden Globe round the world race?
Well, I kind of got interested in the Golden Globe race when the last edition in 2018 and 19 was underway. Before that, I didn't even know that this race had started up. And it just attracted me, everything about it, from especially the fact that it's a retro race and you got to do it solo, because I like single-handed sailing. I don't think I would have bothered doing it if it had been, a crude kind of race. And, all the aspects of doing celestial navigation, not having modern weather forecasting and all that I really love. But anyway, so I started saying, this is kind of a race that I think I'd like to do. And I started saying it more and more, and eventually people said to me, well, stop talking about it, sign up for the race. And I said, well, I don't know if I could do that, because I don't have the boat and I don't have the finances. I don't have the kind of budget to, get to the start line of a race like this. And they said, friends were really supportive, and they said, hey, well, we'll join your campaign as volunteers, and we'll set up a Facebook page for you, and we'll try and do crowdfunding. And one thing just led to the next. But basically I signed up at the end of 2019. And ever since then, all my thoughts, all my focus, everything had just been towards getting to the start line, which meant, the first thing I did was I did research into the permitted types of boats that the race would allow. And I started speaking to naval architects. I started speaking to other racing sailors, and the first step was to choose the design of boat I wanted. And I had a very interesting conversation right at the start with someone, a racing sailor, who said to me, why are you doing this race? And I said, well, doesn't one do a race because you want to win? And he said, no, people have all their own reasons for doing a race like this, and some of them don't care about winning. They want to just finish the circuit. But if you want to win, everything you do from the word go is going to be focused towards winning. So you'll choose the right boat. You won't buy a boat because it's readily available and it's cheap and you can afford it. If you have to get the boat you believe will win, and if it's more expensive and if it's going to mean that you have to work much harder and raise more funds and all the rest, you have to do everything from this moment onwards towards winning. And that's what I did. So the next step was choosing the design. Then it was finding a boat of that design that was available. Then it was the purchase of the boat. Then the boat, they're old boats. This boat was launched in 1988 and it wasn't in the best of conditions. I could have bought other boats that had been in a better condition, but I wanted that boat and that design. So then it took me, and then COVID was happening in the background as well, which also complicated things.
Yeah.
But I eventually got to the boat, and then it was a 1-year solid refit with just 2 of us working on the refit, which was great for me because I did a lot of the work with my own hands and I learned a lot out of that, and it gave me the confidence to know that I can probably fix anything out at sea because I've been so intimately involved with the refit. And then another big proponent of my preparation was actually spending time at sea on the boat. So a lot of people said, "You're crazy, why did you do it?" But what I did was I sailed from Canada, where I'd bought the boat and where we'd done the refit, to Cape Town, which was already, 57 days at sea and the best part of 7,000 nautical miles. And then I sailed from Cape Town back up towards France to get to the start line. So I had, maybe 13,000 nautical miles to spend on the boat, to learn the boat, to get to, figure out for myself how I was going to do certain maneuvers on my own, like, flying a spinnaker, dropping the spinnaker in rough conditions, and any other improvements I had to make before the race. That time I spent at sea really gave me that opportunity. So that was kind of my preparation in a nutshell.
So what I'm reading from this is when you set a goal, there's single-minded determination and planning to get to it. Is that what defines you?
I would say so, because if you asked anyone of my friends or my family in the years from signing up for the race officially up until getting to the start line, I didn't take a holiday. I'd hardly even take a weekend. And all I ever spoke about, I'm sure I tired out all my friends and family, but all I ever spoke about was the race and the boat and what I have to do and blah, blah, blah. So it really was an obsession, and I knew it would be until the day I got across the start line and I was underway sailing.
So there was a single obsession, a single goal, and you alone, but you had the empathy to go and save somebody else whose boat was sinking.
Well, a lot of people have said to me, "That's fantastic that you did it and all," and but anyone would. It's kind of an unwritten, and maybe it is even a written law, but of the sea that you help anyone who's under stress. In fact, I think you're obliged to. And I didn't do it out of obligation. I was just happy that I was in a position to help, and anyone would have done that for anyone, because when you've been out at sea and you've seen how scary things can get, it's good to know that there are other people out there that will come to your rescue if you ever need it. And of course, there was no doubt in my mind when I was informed by the race organization that the organizers that Tapio Lehtinen's boat had sunk, and he was in the southern Indian Ocean on a life raft. It was, obvious to me that I was going to do everything I could to get to him as quickly as possible.
Well, you are now, as I said in the beginning, an inspiration to people, inspiration to not only sailors, men and women. How does that sit with you?
I don't know whether it's entirely sunk in. Firstly, I didn't know that I would win the race. I knew I was going to try my very best, but there's so many factors in a race like this that could work for or against you. A large proponent of it is luck. If you were unlucky and you got hit by a bad wave and had bad breakage, you might have to quit the race. Or we don't have weather information, so you might, and I did in fact get stuck in the doldrums for quite a long time, which could have ruined my chances of winning. But, right up until the end, I knew I was going to try my best to win, but that it actually sunk in that I had won once I was over the finish line. I don't know whether it's quite sunk in yet. And also, people say, well, you're the first woman to have done this, solo, non-stop, unassisted around the world. But I haven't thought much about the factor of being a woman. I mean, obviously, I am a woman and nothing's going to change that. But for me, it was about being part of the race and being there as an equal. I didn't want any extra privileges or perks or advantages for being a woman. And I certainly didn't want any disadvantages either. I just wanted to be there as an equal, and give it my all and everything. And that's what happened. And that I'm super happy about. And now people, have said, well, how does it feel to you about, what it might mean to other women out there? Well, if it's an inspiration to other women, then, that's a double bonus for me, because that gives the thing, maybe a nicer, more meaningful aspect to it as well. But it hasn't really sunk into me. I'm kind of a little bit overwhelmed by the amount of interest that has been shown in my story since I've come over the finish line.
You've talked about sailing in the doldrums. What about the mental doldrum that you hit, or that people hit? And you clearly have a lot of resilience. But is these sort of lessons for other people on if you have a really bad day and you're really lonely, and that how did you get out of that? How do you still stay resilient and present and doing what you have to do?
Yeah, well, the doldrums coming back up the Atlantic were actually the hardest time for me of just not having wind, because there's nothing you can do other than be patient and wait for the wind. But there were certain factors that did help me through it. And one of them is all that frustration of wanting to move and get wind and keep going. I could get rid of by doing some sort of exercise, physical exercise. So one of the things I did was I had enough. I'd drop the sails, I'd jump overboard, and I'd swim. Then I'd swim a nice little distance away from the boat. The boat would get a little bit smaller, and I feel like I could get in the situation and look at it from a little bit of a distance, and then swim back to the boat, be back happy that I'm back on the boat, because of course you realize, well, the boat is carrying my life, and I do boat. But just that physical exercise was a great thing. And then another thing is, instead of sitting around in the doldrums and envisaging the end and the finish line and how I'm falling back, the moment I got into a negative thought pattern of I'm losing now, I'm not going to catch up to the others, it's just to shut it down right there and then and say, stop thinking like that. Let's just get through today, and tomorrow the wind might come back. And then when the wind comes back, you're going to feel different anyway. You're going to be back doing what you want to do, and that is moving and sailing and seeing the boat perform. So when the time was hard, and the going was tough, it really was a question of just getting through the day and seeing what comes the next day, and breaking up the trip into little milestones rather than always envisaging the end, because it's a long trip, so it can feel daunting. But then you say, I'll just have to get there. I just have to get through the doldrums. I just have to get past the next cape. That makes things a lot more manageable.
Oh, that's actually lovely lessons in that. You broke up a bit at one stage there, but you look very arty. It looks like more than art for a while there. That it's just so lovely speaking to you. And just what's a little thing that somebody doesn't know about you? I know that I've noticed that you speak French as well. So you speak German, you speak French, you speak what, Afrikaans, English?
Yeah, so English, Afrikaans, German, kind of. I learned as I was growing up. So they all came easily to me. And then I learned French at school, but I really got to practice and learn how to speak French and feel confident in it on my bicycle trip through Africa, because I was going through Northwest and Central Africa. So a lot of those countries were French, partially French speaking. So, and then I actually, when I was about 18, 19, I set off on what was a gap year, but it turned into many gap years. I don't think I've actually quite finished with my gap year yet. And I wanted to see the cold and Arctic environment. And I really wanted to train sled dogs and do something really different, because I liked animals, but I wanted to experience snow and ice and all the rest. So I landed up making my way up to Finland and working there. Because I kind of spent 2 years on and off in Finland, at the time I learned how to speak Finnish, and I was quite fluent at it, but I haven't spoken it for 18 years, and it's a very difficult language, so I wouldn't claim that I speak it anymore, but it's still somewhere in my head. And I love languages. So for example, on this trip, a language I've always wanted to learn, and I've read, teach yourself books, and I've try to speak to people and practice it, but it's Xhosa. So I took a language book on this race, and if the sailing was fun and there wasn't much I had to attend to, then I'd be trying to study Xhosa. So I do enjoy languages very much, and that is actually my goal, to just go and spend a whole lot of time in the Transkei amongst people that are really going to be speaking Xhosa to me, where I have no other option to speak any other language and try and master it, because learning a new language is always fun to me. So.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, I know it's probably too soon. You're still resting. What next? I mean, because you talked about snow and ice and dogs. And so, what's next for Kirsten?
Yeah, I'm not really sure at all because I've been so focused just on this project, and now it's all come to an end. But I've still got a few loose ends to wrap up. I've still got some work I'd like to do on the boat, and maybe do a last trip on the boat because I've grown so fond of the boat. It's been my home and it's been my all and every focus for such a long time that I just like to have a trip on the boat, a fun trip, nothing amazingly challenging or anything, just relaxing, cruising, maybe go down to the Cape Verdes or something like that, islands, and just find some closure, and then I'll have to sell the boat. And once I've done that, I'll really be at liberty to invent a new adventure. But I would like to spend a bit of time just at home in South Africa, just in the areas that I really love, surfing, hiking, just doing something that's stress-free and really healthy for myself. And while I'm doing that, I'm sure I'll invent the next project.
Well, spoken like a true South African. So the last two quick fire questions. What's the books you read, and what did you read on the trip?
I read all sorts of books. I read a whole lot of sailing books, but I took the language Xhosa book with. I took a whole lot of Dalene Mathee with because I really enjoy writing, because she writes novels, so they're easy to read. They're not like historical books, but you always learn loads out of it because they're historical novels. So, for example, I read Peter and a whole lot of her other books, and otherwise I had some classic books like Dostoevsky on board, and I had German authors on board, I had French authors on board, I had Finnish authors on board. I did take quite a big library with, because 8 months at sea is a long time, and sometimes it was really mentally healthy just to escape the whole sailing and race aspect by submerging myself into a book.
Okay, and last question. I see you got a message from President Cyril Ramaphosa. Yeah, that was on Twitter. So who gave you the coolest message? Who was a total surprise?
That was actually probably the biggest surprise, and it made me really, really happy, because I think the proudest moment in my life ever up to date has been crossing the finish line of the Golden Globe race and waving the South African flag as I was doing it, and on top of it, by a sheer coincidence, it happened to be on Freedom Day as well. So that made me super happy, and I never expected a message from President Ramaphosa, but it really, really touched me. So that was probably the most exciting message I got.
Well, Kirsten Neuschäfer, you're a legend, clearly, for South Africans, and you're a South African patriot as well. We all look up to you, and congratulations. Have a great rest, and we're looking forward to see what you're going to do next.